good, YouTube? It's your boy Matthew Walker. How y'all doing today, man? Listen, sorry I didn't upload yesterday. You know what I'm saying, working some things behind the scenes to try to upgrade certain things, you know what I'm saying? You'll see pretty soon. I don't know how soon, but soon. So, alright. But yeah, just know that I ain't slacking around. I ain't just chilling. I'm working. So even though I don't upload one day, I'm still working, I'm still grinding for the channel. So no cap. But listen, today we are back at it with the series, Thinking Basketball. Shout out to the author Ben Taylor for this series. This is episode 7, and was David Robinson one of the most valuable players ever? We're gonna see. I'm gonna learn a lot from this video, you know what I'm saying, about David Robinson. And yeah, if those who don't probably not that much familiar of Robinson too, we're gonna learn together. So yeah, man. Without further ado, let's just read the video, man. 3, 2, 1. Let's get it, man.
Basketball Adonis David Robinson generated some of the best regular season numbers in league history.
Oh, good lay.
He and Michael Jordan are the only players ever to win a scoring title and Defensive Player of the Year.
Okay.
But was he just a paper tiger?
Oh my!
Did he crumble in the playoffs?
All right, let me chill out.
Or was he actually a complex, multifaceted superstar and one of the most valuable players of the three-point era?
From the street.
Where's Larry Bird in all this? Has it blocked by Elijah Wan? Michael Jordan saves the day.
Hey.
This series tackles one question. Who was the best at his best?
Hey.
We start at the ABA merger and go through the best multi-year stretches, examining the legends who provided the most on-court impact. These are the greatest peaks.
Where's peaks? Let's do it. Let's get crack-a-lackin', man.
Doesn't take a rocket scientist to understand that he's very special. It's ghostly. It's not recognizable. You think of it as normal quickness, but I think it transcends that, goes to another level.
In the 80s, we saw some of the greatest offensive players to ever grace the hardwood. But Robinson was a callback to defensively dominant big men like Bill Russell. In college, David's quick leaping drew comparisons to Russell. It took a millisecond for him to reach 11 feet with a quick hop and his long, outstretched left hand. Listed at 7'1", Robinson was a good 2 or 3 inches taller than Russell, and his combination of size and jumping speed made him a devastating rim protector. NASA should have conducted lab testing on how quickly Robinson launched off the floor. All he required was a little knee bend to spring up off of 2 feet. And he was almost entirely a 2-footed jumper, often using a quick hop to organize his feet and then swat. Here's another look. There's the little hop to load up, and he's still on the floor when Wayman Tisdale nears his apex, and in less than 0.2 of a second, Robinson arrives above the rim. It typically took Robinson about 6 or 7/10 of a second from the time he started his gather to meet the ball above the hoop. For comparison, this crazy Michael Jordan block took over 8/10 from his windup, and when Robinson went directly into his bunny hop to contest, he was comparable to Russell himself in time to reach 10 feet. Throw in Robinson's length, and he could just materialize out of nowhere like a shot-blocking wraith.
Oh my gosh.
On the offensive end, Robinson can feel unspectacular. His upper body stiffness lacks a certain sexiness for most people, but that's because he was a 7'1" bionic human whose best move was just being quicker and more explosive than normal big men. Despite his height, he preferred to turn and face the hoop from the mid-range and go to work out of a classic triple threat position. His first step was overwhelming for most opponents, and he was strong enough to power around slight contact like this. Even though it's only one hard dribble, he was a boatload approaching the basket with a short runway. This face, jab, and go game was too fast for many fives of the 1990s, and it led to a parade to the free throw line. Robinson's free throw rates peaked right around Jordan's during their best playoff stretches, despite David having the ball less than MJ and not receiving deliberate fouls like Shaq and Dwight Howard.
Dang.
As you can see from that list, it's hard for big men to create signature shots when marching to the free throw line constantly. But as a 75% free throw shooter, this was incredibly effective offense. He even threw in his own mini Euro step, where he'd swing back the other way if he felt his first step cut off. They didn't call this pivot foot travel as much back then, even though they were stricter enforcing 2 steps.
I'm
in a sense, his physical gifts made Robinson the 90s version of Giannis Antetokounmpo, except instead of attacking from around the three-point line, Robinson set up shop near the elbows and relied on a quick first step. Unlike Giannis, the Admiral blended his rim attacks with an effective face-up jumper. He could fake a drive with that jab step to create space, then fire a clean look.
It's a good shot.
In the data we have access to at the end of the 90s, Robinson hit 43 to 44% of his mid-range twos, landing him somewhere between the 60th and 75th percentile among volume mid-range shooters this century. And he could even drain those off a dribble, although he appeared less comfortable moving into his shots like this.
I feel that.
His outside shot then allowed him to sell up fakes and beeline to the rim, and that resulted in more layups or trips back to the free throw line. Back in those days, he was occasionally criticized for playing like this, seen merely as a jump shooter who lacked the traditional back-to-the-basket game to dominate like a classic big.
Wow.
But remember, back-to-the-basket offense isn't incredibly effective unto itself. Kareem was basically the only big man to spearhead great offenses for the first 35 or 40 years of the shot clock, and he did so next to elite guards. Besides, Robinson did have a solid low post game too. His physical advantages allowed him to power into certain opponents, and once again, that pressure led to quality looks at the rim or more free throws. He also had a nice little fadeaway to his left shoulder, and he could flow into this quickly, and his size and high release.
So he sounded like a really positive dude. I heard his attitude and all that stuff. He sounded like a really well-spoken, all that stuff, you know what I'm saying?
Polished, and he used it quite a bit against smaller defenders who gave him problems like Karl Malone.
You would think he has a deeper voice, but
bodybuilding strength and quick feet prevented Robinson from blasting by him. And he could hold deep position against David and disrupt his setups despite giving up 4 inches or so.
Cookies.
Agility and strength were an antidote to Robinson's first step, and once a drive was walled up, he could target the ball with that patented slapdown move, and in today's jargon, he would be an Admiral stopper. In general, bigs who were fairly strong and could move their feet well slowed Robinson down by taking away the quickness advantage he held over so many traditional centers of the 90s. David could occasionally turn back to that right shoulder, but this was a tougher shot for him. He doesn't rotate that quickly, and so squaring his shoulders to the hoop takes an extra, sometimes awkward beat.
I got you.
Against weaker defensive teams of his era, Robinson was less likely to encounter matchups like this, but his scoring took a major haircut against stronger defensive teams who were more likely to have versatile big men. That 6% drop in efficiency is on the large side for modern superstars, and in the regular season, Robinson was able to juice his scoring numbers a bit more than a typical star player by picking on weaker teams, which meant that his peak regular season numbers overstated how effective his scoring arsenal was in a playoff setting. Now, this is still good scoring, it's just not great scoring. The Admiral even threw in a little spin move occasionally, but this was also stiffer than versions from other superstars at the time, like Hakeem Olajuwon. Even Robinson's really impressive shots, like this turn over Olajuwon, didn't leave the same mark as Hakeem's crazy high difficult fadeaways.
Facts.
And this aesthetic gap helped create the impression that Olajuwon dominated Robinson and was light years ahead of him as a player. But that narrative misses a critical part of the story and overlooks Robinson's actual value on a high-level team.
Good pass.
Dennis, you're just a little bit too tight, man. You need to loosen up. Over the top, man. Be an individual. So what do you want me to do? Well, you can start by eating your pizza the wrong way. Crust first.
After a number of near wins, Robinson finally grabbed an MVP trophy in 1995 and led the Spurs to the Western Finals, where he ran into a buzzsaw.
Please do that, bro.
Robinson was tasked with guarding Hakeem, often without any help, and while he defended it fairly well on most possessions, a heads-up battle with Hakeem was a bad matchup for the Admiral. Olajuwon had some monster games in their regular season meetings, and Hakeem's quickness could take away Robinson's first step, while on the other end, Robinson couldn't really take away his dream-shaking and wild shot-making. Robinson was a really good man defender. He used his length to contest shots well, and he was able to hold his own against the powerful brutes of that era, grappling with a young Shaquille O'Neal here before his quickness.
I'm still on that piece of thing, bro. Like eating a crust backwards.
He was long and springy enough to recover, but he was susceptible to
heating up cereal in a microwave. Like, you know what I'm saying? That's kind of wild. Okay, back into my fault.
Scenarios, especially near the hoop. Jumping like this fed into Hakeem's hands as a ball-faking Houdini, throwing his dream shakes into Robinson and setting him up for memorable scoring highlights. Combine Olajuwon's tough shot-making and his own natural quickness, and it makes for a lopsided game of one-on-one. But that's the thing about Robinson. He's a good one-on-one player, but he's a 5-on-5 star. His off-ball game was just as, if not more important than his isolation scoring. His face-up jumper made him a viable catch-and-shoot finisher in the mid-range, but more importantly, it made him a pick-and-pop weapon. This wasn't the spread pick-and-roll that is so popular today, but the Spurs ran plenty of ball screens inside the three-point arc, where Robinson could pop to open space and knock down positive value shots.
That's deadly.
By 1994, this shot was pretty dialed in for David, and he could even turn it into an up fake and go in these situations. His athletic gifts also made him a natural finisher around the basket. This play against the Rockets shows just how easy he could make it look, catching the ball 10 feet away and casually gliding by a fleet of defenders without a dribble. His athleticism made him a weapon in transition as well, where he used his straight line speed to outrun slower, burlier centers of his time. It's less common today, but this penalized bigger lineups who crashed the glass, and it was normal for Robinson to outsprint opponents multiple times in a game like he did to Shaquille O'Neal in this 1996 matchup. David was one of the better lob threats of that era, a giant explosive target, and that's two-time Defensive Player of the Year Alonzo Mourning he just ragdolls. I do think he was a touch more fluid flowing into these in his first few seasons, but lobs were certainly part of his offensive package in those peak years. San Antonio started to unlock this talent in 1996 when they ran more side pick and rolls with Avery Johnson, who grew comfortable with these reads, and I think between his mid-range shooting and his finishing skills, Robinson would have made a wonderful partner for a high-level pick-and-roll guard. Instead, he was asked to carry the entire offense in the mid-90s, which wasn't quite an ideal role.
I feel that.
The Admiral was best suited to anchor a team's defense and play a hybrid role on offense, acting as a co-pilot or second-best offensive player. The exact role he would play after his peak when Tim Duncan arrived in 1998.
Shout out to Duncan.
Duncan shouldered a larger isolation load, while the flexible Robinson played largely the same style out of the high post. Robinson's off-ball skills allowed him to fit in well with another talent, where he could still co-anchor some of the offense, here drawing a double for a huge three in the title-clinching game in 1999. And he could mix in his own isolation scoring in more select doses. The result was a decrease in volume for Robinson with an increase in scoring efficiency, a slightly above average offense for the Spurs as a team, and, more importantly, a dominant defense behind those twin towers. The Spurs engineered arguably the greatest defensive stretch in league history, holding their playoff opponents about 7 points per 100 below their regular season efficiency, a feat matched by only a few teams, and those teams had weaker regular season defenses. While Duncan was a great defender out of the gate, it was Robinson's impact that led the Spurs on defense, and while many view Duncan as the clear alpha dog on those teams after 1998, Robinson wasn't far behind because of his two-way impact and ability to blend with Duncan on offense. Robinson was a good entry passer in the mid-90s, and his best passes were from the perimeter, where he could face up and survey the floor.
These are tough passes, bro.
In this position, his height allowed him to see the action unfold, and he could fire to cutters with easy speed, or he could feather in deliveries with a bit more touch.
That's a good pass.
He was always a willing extra passer. In this 1993 play, he can see the court and quickly flips it to a high leverage spot.
Respect.
And by 1995, I thought he was better at processing cutting action in front of him.
Oh my gosh.
This is a really nice read here, quickly spotting that his
cutters
big
defender
goes behind another Laker in a kind of half-hearted tag. And while there's no quick shot, it's the kind of pass that demonstrates some understanding of what defenses are doing, and it shows some anticipation. Although he wasn't elite in these spots, he misses the potential Draymond Green special here, and in my film study, I'm not sure he ball faked in a situation like this one time to manipulate the defense. Here's another one from the same game, where he doesn't have time to really process the backside action and misses a potential layup. When he couldn't survey the floor, the results were choppier. He can't quickly process that the corner is open here.
I got you.
And with his head down, he desperately flails this to an outlet. With his back to the basket, as long as he could see that help coming from the top, his kick-out passes were pretty solid. And this created plenty of open shots for the Spurs when they spaced the floor around him. Here he turns to spot the help, and in trying to locate his teammate, the delivery gets away from him a bit. Here's another one where he can't see the double coming, and his instinct is to turn and pass, but again, it's not the smoothest delivery, and it's deflected in front of his body. His lack of a handle and that lateral stiffness hurt him in these spots where well-timed double teams could prevent him from quickly moving it.
Yeah, that's good timing.
And in this case,
for a double
he's
team,
clamped up and misses another possible dagger.
Heard you.
Still, I think that high post extra passing prowess, along with his massive defensive impact, was the key to unlocking Robinson's value as a defensive superstar and offensive number 2.
For sure.
From 1998 to 2000, Robinson logged 37 minutes per game in the playoffs, while Duncan played 41 minutes a game. When Robinson sat on the bench during those years, the Spurs were outscored by 16 points every 48 minutes.
Wow.
But when Robinson played, they were a whopping plus 11.
Dang, that's a
and
big
since
difference.
We've been tracking this data since 1997, that is the largest change among any rotation player on record in the postseason. In the 98 and 99 playoffs, the Spurs were actually better in the limited minutes Duncan was on the bench. We're only talking about a few hundred minutes here, so there's plenty of noise. But this is a huge reminder of how impactful a hybrid player like Robinson can be without being the team's clear-cut number 1 scorer. This makes sense when we remember these were dominant defensive teams that were slightly above average on offense. It also brings us full circle back to Bill Russell, who, as we examined in the series prelude, dominated the 60s without being his team's best offensive player.
I think Bill Russell would love to play with the Spurs. If he could, I think he would love the Spurs. Obviously, he's a Celtics for life.
And furthermore, how would we view him if he
was
the one who joined a 32-year-old Duncan in 1998 and propelled the Spurs over the top, launching the Popovich era? Robinson was clearly a better offensive player than Russell, although despite that incredible speed off the floor and his considerable defensive impact, he wasn't entirely on Russ's level at that end. His reactions to threats were quite quick, especially if he could see the threat in front of him, but Robinson could be a bit too stationary in subpar positions. He wasn't really down in his stance, pivoting around a lot like Bill Walton, but I think he didn't bounce around a lot because of his limitations moving laterally. His lateral movement wasn't really poor, but it was more laborious and stiffer, especially compared to his straight-ahead quickness.
I got you.
And so he couldn't easily slide horizontally in the paint, which limited him compared to some of his normal straight-line movement in help situations.
I heard you.
Just like we saw in his passing game, he wasn't great at mapping the court that he couldn't see, and sometimes that allowed breakdowns behind his field of vision. Pick and roll also wasn't a huge part of the game then, but Robinson's horizontal movement meant this wasn't really a defensive strength for him, and in general, he tried to avoid stretching to the perimeter. Still, a strong offensive game and nearly GOAT defense yields some massive overall impact. We have regular season plus-minus data going back to 1994, and on a per-game basis, Robinson looks like one of the best regular season players we've ever seen. Using our historical box score estimates, his playoff value during these peak seasons looks good, but not quite what we'd expect for a top 10 candidate. However, the Admiral moves up a rank when we use his numbers from 1998, and we know when we add in plus-minus data for those years, he looked like a Titan.
Wow.
This reinforces what the box score can't capture: Robinson's combination of quality isolation scoring and off-ball offense, along with that massive defensive impact, make him one of the most valuable players of his era. His two-way skill set scales well on a variety of championship rosters, and as a result, there aren't 5 centers since the ABA merger who I think have peaked higher than David Robinson.
Wow. Hey, man. Good vid right here. I learned a lot. I learned a lot right here about David Robinson. No cap. No cap. I respect his game. He the type of the way he plays the game, he's the type of dudes that I want on my squad. You know what I'm saying? Pick and pop, give and go, quick, you know what I'm saying? Vertical leap in like a millisecond, get the block, and we out, we gone. You know what I'm saying? Athletic enough to sprint past other centers to get back down first. You know what I'm saying? For easy alley-oop, or you know what I'm saying? I miss it. I miss that type of play style. I miss his game. Respect, man. Respect. Great vid from Thinking Basketball. You know what I'm saying? Hope y'all enjoyed. You know what I'm saying? And yeah, that's gonna do it for today right here. Again, you know, the days that I don't upload are the days that I'm working behind the scenes to get the channel to a better place, quality content, all that stuff. So never think that I'm not grinding or nothing like that. And if I'm not grinding, I'll let y'all know. Real talk, like if I'm taking a break, all that stuff, I'll let y'all know that 100%. But I'm not planning on taking no break soon. So yeah, man, we're gonna keep grinding, keep working hard, and it's gonna be moving up some levels, man. You know what I'm saying? It's time to upgrade to a new tier. No cap. So yeah, man. Hope y'all enjoyed. Make sure y'all stay well, stay blessed. I love you guys very much, man. Really do. I really appreciate the love and support. None of this stuff is possible without you guys. So I really do appreciate y'all. And yeah, love you guys again. Peace. Bye-bye.